Okay, let's get into this. Imagine this statistic for a moment. In the U.S., the homicide clear rate, it's somewhere around, 61.5%?
Yeah, that's about right.
Which means almost 40% of families. Well, they never get answers.
It's stark when you compare it internationally. You mentioned Japan, Germany.
Exactly. Japan's like 95%, Germany way up in the high 80s, 90s. It really makes you think about all those cold cases piling up.
Mm-hmm.
But what if the key wasn't just, standard police work? What if it involved things like scrolling social media feeds?
Or using digital tools to pinpoint locations.
Yeah. Or even recognizing something as simple as, say, a Halloween mask from a blurry photo.
And that's really the fascinating part, isn't it? The potential for everyday tech, plus just sheer determination from individuals to step into that gap.
Bringing new angles, new possibilities to cases that have just sat there for years.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what we're exploring today. We're looking at this really compelling book. It tracks this one journalist's journey. He starts out writing about unsolved crimes.
Right, feeling that defrustration. You mentioned these stories with no endings.
And then he decides, I have to try and help solve them myself. It's this story about, tenacity using modern tools.
And it's really rooted in the emotional reality, the raw experience of the victims' families.
Definitely. And looking closely at material like this book is actually something we explore quite a bit on Mindful Moment.
Right, that's our YouTube channel. We use AI analysis of books to kind of spark reflection and critical thinking.
So join us today as we unpack the key ideas, the sometimes surprising methods, and really the emotional heart of this book about chasing darkness and maybe finding some light.
Where does this journalist's story really begin? You mentioned he was covering crime.
Yeah, like a lot of crime reporters, his path started with covering some pretty grim stuff.
Right.
That first case, the one on 9/11 night, can you remind us about that?
Right, that was his very first murder assignment, September 11th, 2001. A Polish immigrant, Henryk Siwak, shot and killed in Brooklyn, a place he'd apparently never been before, wearing army fatigues, just hours after the towers fell.
In all that chaos.
Exactly. In the absolute chaos of that night, his death just got overlooked.
Yeah.
It's still unsolved.
And covering cases like Siwiak's, cases that just lingered unresolved, that must have been incredibly frustrating. He talks about writing rubbernecking articles. What's that about?
Yeah, he felt like he was just describing bad things, reporting on the tragedy, the loss, but not actually doing anything constructive.
Just documenting.
Just documenting, yeah. Not changing anything. He wanted to write stories that had resolutions, that brought some kind of justice. Stories with actual endings.
I can imagine that feeling just builds up over time. Were there specific things, moments that really pushed him to make that shift from just writing about crime to trying to solve it?
There were definitely triggers. I mean, on a practical level, needing money after his first kid was born played a role.
Sure.
He took this job where the only advice was accuracy, 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 which ironically became kind of a core principle later on. But there was also a real low point. He talks about earning just $40 after trying to help some victims' families and basically being dismissed.
Wow, $40.
Yeah. And that seemed to really cement it for him. He was done just watching. He wanted to try and actually solve murders.
Okay, so he's got this drive, this need to do more. How did he start? What were the first steps?
Well, the first idea was pretty big. Maybe a TV show about solving cold cases.
Ambitious.
Yeah. He also launched a national crime blog, built this huge database of unsolved murders, supposedly the biggest in the country at the time.
But that still wasn't quite it.
It seems not. He still felt like something was missing.
Yeah.
He was chasing that tangible result, that feeling of getting a solve.
Yeah.
Making a real difference for one specific family.
Which raises a really big question, especially now, in this age of constant connection, constant information. How do you actually harness all that for something like justice?
And that's where his approach gets really interesting, really innovative. The core idea he hit on was using social media, specifically using geotargeting.
Geotargeting, so like location-based ads.
Exactly. Taking info about an unsolved case and pushing it directly onto the screens of people who live and work right there in the exact area where the crime happened.
Okay, tell us about an example. The book mentions the Mark Gaines case in Chicago.
Right. That was a brutal case. There was surveillance video, very clear, showing a violent robbery. It got circulated online as the man in the green hoodie.
But no leads, despite the video.
0 leads for months. Frustrating. So he had the location, right?
Yeah.
So he decided to try Facebook boosting. Drew a virtual circle, like you said, 2 miles around the crime scene, targeted something like 240,000 Facebook users right there.
240,000 people.
And did it work? It did. A tipster saw the ad, saw the images from the video, and recognized the guy, mostly from his distinctive hairline and build. Identified him by his street name, Big Dummy. Real name turned out to be Marcus Moore. The author confirmed the ID, gathered more info, passed it all to the police.
And the book talks about the feeling after the arrest, elation, but then this kind of hollow feeling.
Yeah, a complex reaction. But ultimately, knowing that a step towards justice was taken for that specific crime.
That's powerful. There's another case you mentioned, the Halloween mask murder.
Yes, in El Monte, California. A robbery at a Jack-in-the-Box. The employee, Juan Vidal, was tragically killed.
And the challenge there was obvious. The suspect was masked.
Right. Seems almost impossible to ID someone like that from grainy footage.
So how did he tackle that one?
He took a screenshot of the mask itself from the video. Then he used Google reverse image search.
On the mask?
On the mask. And it actually identified it as a specific type, a mass-produced mask called Stan the Man.
Okay, that's clever. So now he has a specific mask.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then he could run social media ads featuring the mask, targeting the area around the Jack-in-the-Box.
And that worked too.
It did. Tips started coming in. People recognized the mask, or the description, and pointed towards a guy named Louis Herrera.
Amazing. And the book mentions the cost.
Surprisingly low for that one, something like $900, but incredibly effective. It generated the tips that led police to Herrera.
It just shows what you can do with these tools if you're creative and focused. The book mentions other cases too, right? Like helping with an ID in Nashville.
Yeah, the Teddy Grassett case. Assisting with an ID there. And finding a missing person, Mariah Bertolini, basically just by amplifying her case on social media.
So it's not just the tech, it's how you apply it. Using everyday tools to crack these really tough problems that maybe traditional methods struggle with or don't have the resources for.
Precisely. It's intentional.
Okay, so you've got the tech side, the digital sleuthing, but cold cases are obviously deeply human stories. And the book really dives into that too, especially through Michelle McNamara.
Absolutely. Michelle McNamara is a huge figure in this narrative. Her relentless work chasing the Golden State Killer, it was almost an obsession.
The author knew her.
He did, yeah. He met her, was really struck by her dedication, her work on her book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
Her death was so sudden, so tragic, only 46. How did that hit the author? How did it affect his work?
He describes it very vividly. Like, Sherlock just died and I'm Watson.
Wow.
Her book was unfinished. The killer was still out there. It really lit a fire under him, a commitment to help finish her work and keep hunting the guy she'd spent years tracking.
And this is where another tool comes in, right? A really powerful one that ultimately cracked the Golden State Killer case. Familial DNA.
Yeah, genetic genealogy. It's a game changer.
How does that actually work? It sounds complicated.
Well, the basic idea is you take DNA from a crime scene, or maybe unidentified remains, and you upload it to public genealogy databases.
Like Ancestry or 23andMe?
More like GED Match, which is specifically set up for people to compare DNA results from different testing companies. People upload their data voluntarily to find relatives. So investigators upload the crime scene DNA, hoping to find a distant relative, maybe a third or fourth cousin who's in the database.
And then what? How do you get from a third cousin to a suspect?
That's where the hard work comes in. Genetic genealogists then build out family trees, working backward and forwards, using public records, obituaries, social media, trying to figure out how that distant relative connects to the unknown suspect or victim. It's painstaking work.
But it worked for the Golden State Killer.
It absolutely did. After Michelle's death, investigator Paul Holes, who the author collaborated with, uploaded the killer's DNA profile to GED Match. Got a hit? A distant cousin.
Just like that.
Well, not quite just like that. Then he and a dedicated volunteer genealogist spent ages building out this incredibly complex family tree, which eventually led them right to Joseph DeAngelo.
Incredible. And familial DNA was key in another big case in the book too, right? The Bear Brook murders.
Yes, the Allenstown 4 case. Those poor victims found in barrels, years apart, unidentified for decades.
How did DNA help there?
It helped identify the killer, a guy named Terry Rasmussen, who used a ton of aliases like Bob Evans. And it identified two of the victims, Marlise Honeychurch and her little girl, Real Elizabeth Vaughn.
And it connected him to other cases too.
Potentially, yeah. To the disappearance of Denise Bowden.
Yeah.
And again, citizen genealogists like Barbara Ray Venter were just relentless. They were the ones doing the deep dive using DNA and public records. True persistence.
It sounds like this process can uncover some really shocking family secrets along the way, things people had no idea about.
Oh, absolutely. The book talks about moments like that, discovering that Marlise's daughter Marie wasn't fathered by her ex-husband, as everyone assumed, but by the killer Rasmussen.
Oh, my.
Or the FBI having to tell Marlise's other daughters that the man they thought was their dad wasn't their biological father. It's profound, life-changing stuff revealed by this tech and sheer determination.
When you talk about all these efforts, the social media campaigns, the genealogy work, there's a clear theme emerging: persistence.
Definitely. It's central to the book. The author even shares stories about his own father, who apparently always said, "Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence." That idea of just not stopping no matter what gets thrown at you, you keep going. That seems to be the fuel for him, for the genealogists, for the families who refuse to give up.
It's clearly not easy work, though. It's not just sitting behind a computer. There are real challenges, real shadows to navigate.
For sure. One huge obstacle is the no-snitch culture you find in some places. That, combined with a really deep, sometimes justified distrust of the police.
Yeah, the book mentions that study, right? Connecting police misconduct to people being less likely to call 911.
Exactly. The Matthew Desmond study. It showed how incidents of police misconduct could lead to fewer 911 calls, which then correlated with a rise in homicides. Broken trust makes getting tips incredibly hard.
And even if a citizen sleuth does find a potential suspect.
Right. Even then, the police still need solid, admissible evidence for an arrest. An online tip isn't usually enough on its own, and that can be frustrating for everyone involved.
Plus, there are personal risks for the citizens who get involved, aren't there? It's not without danger.
Not at all. The author mentions walking through dangerous areas while researching, even getting threats. And then there's the risk of crowdsourcing going completely sideways.
Like the Boston bombing misidentifications.
Exactly that. Or the really tragic case of Leyland, a young woman who died by suicide after being wrongly accused online during one of these amateur investigations. The potential for harm is real.
So, given all that, the book must lay out some pretty clear rules for anyone trying to do this kind of citizen sleuthing.
Oh, absolutely. They're crucial. Rule number 1, you do not publish accusations publicly, period.
Okay.
You always take your information, your potential leads, directly to the detective who's officially in charge of the case.
Don't try to bypass them.
Right. And don't expect credit. The goal is justice for the victim, not getting your name in the paper.
And operate within the law.
Yes. The book uses this great analogy. Be the Adam West Batman. Follow the rules. Don't be some rogue vigilante.
That's a really important distinction. The book also seems to step back and think about the perpetrators themselves beyond just labeling them evil.
It does try to. Without making excuses for terrible actions, it talks about seeing shades of gray, looking at things like desperation, drug addiction, really difficult backgrounds, factors that might contribute to someone ending up doing horrific things.
It raises that tough question, doesn't it? How do you acknowledge those complexities, that human background, but still insist on accountability, especially for violent crimes?
And the book lands pretty firmly on. You acknowledge the gray, but justice still needs to be served. Accountability is paramount.
The author even touches on his own feelings about the death penalty, right? When someone he helped identify was facing it.
Yeah, revealing a really complex, kind of nuanced view on what justice actually means in those extreme situations. It's not simple.
It sounds like the success stories, the cases that did get solved or move forward using these methods, started to change things, even getting law enforcement on board.
It seems so. The book describes instances where police departments actually started reaching out to the author, asking for help, especially on cold cases where maybe their resources were stretched thin.
So building bridges.
Yeah, creating a kind of system, however informal, where ethical, organized citizen efforts could genuinely help official investigations, bringing fresh eyes, new tools.
And the potential to scale that up, training others, building a network.
That definitely seems to be part of the vision, expanding the capacity to apply these techniques more broadly.
But ultimately, the book keeps coming back to the why. Who is this all for?
It always comes back to the victims and their families. They're the constant. Their loss, their push for answers. That's the real engine driving so much of this work. Justice for them.
It's interesting. The book even includes a later example of this kind of crowdsourcing power, doesn't it? Something about Star Wars.
Yeah. successfully using crowdsourcing to identify the actor who played Boshek, this unnamed background character in the original movie.
Just shows the power of focused, collective effort on solving any kind of puzzle, big or small.
Exactly. Whether it's movie trivia or a decades-old murder.
Which brings us back to where we started. All those unsolved cases in the U.S. With tools like familial DNA getting better and this potential for harnessing collective effort, maybe there's real hope.
There's potential, definitely. Potential to make a real dent in those numbers, to bring answers, maybe some peace, to families who've waited far too long.
So, thinking about the big takeaways from this book, it really highlights this amazing potential, doesn't it, for regular people, for communities, to actually impact the justice system using these modern tools smartly.
Yeah, and it hammers home the importance of persistence. Just that sheer refusal to give up, even when things look impossible. That's crucial for the victims, for their families.
And it doesn't shy away from the tough stuff either. The complex reality of chasing darkness, the risks, the ethical tightropes you have to walk, understanding the people involved, but always keeping that focus on accountability.
Right, and this kind of deeper analysis, looking at books like this one, is really what we try to do on Mindful Moments.
Our YouTube channel, using AI analysis to dig into books.
And here in our podcasts, too, bringing you these kinds of insights, hopefully helping you think critically about the world.
So, if you found this conversation insightful, if it made you think, please do subscribe to our channel and our podcasts. That way you won't miss future explorations like this one.
And maybe share this with someone else, someone you know who's curious about these kinds of complex issues and likes looking at them from different angles.
Also, if you want to read the book we've been discussing yourself, you can find a link to purchase it right in our show description.
And finally, maybe just take a moment to reflect on some of the ideas we touched on today. You know, that balance between using powerful new tools like social media or DNA for good versus protecting privacy.
How we even define justice now in this digital age, and how communities can get involved safely and effectively in tackling the problems that affect them most. Lots to think about.